Hi, welcome back to the third part of the unemployment series, and in this episode I'll be speaking about the other reasons for unemployment. My name is Susan Wanjiku. I'm the founder of wanjikuseyeke, and here I discuss the relationship between economic development and governance so that you can understand, engage, and influence the matters that affect you and I. Welcome to wanjikuseyeke. Now, in the last episode, I dwelled on slow economic growth as one of the reasons why we have high unemployment. Now, another reason why we have high unemployment is not only because the economy is growing slowly, but also because the economy is not growing fast enough to support and accommodate how fast the population of Kenya has grown. So if you look at this graph, you can see that we were around 7.7 million in 1960, and now we're about 55 million. Now for those guys who are of the ideology that there's nothing like overpopulation, here's the thing. Population by itself isn't the problem. You just need to make sure that the ecosystem itself is enough to support all those people. So whether we're talking about housing, water, access to health, which just doesn't mean the medical facilities, but also the doctors to treat them. We also need enough schools with enough teachers, and we also have to make sure that the environment is clean and transport and waste is properly managed. And most importantly, job creation either by self-employment or by being employed, because how will people sustain themselves? So the people planning for the economy just shouldn't focus on the now, but also for the future. So if you want to make sure that people have a decent quality life, then you have to be very, very conscious of the population growth rate as you do your planning and economic policies. So according to the report on the Presidential Committee on Unemployment in 1983, the report said that the growth and distribution of the population is therefore a major element of Kenya's unemployment problem and will continue to be so for the next 15 years, since those who will be seeking work during that period are already born. Did they solve the problem at the time in the 1980s? No, but the unemployment situation definitely became a bit better during Kibaki's time. Anyway, when it comes to the population issue, women at the time in their 60s and 70s were giving birth to about 8 children. But today, because of many factors like more women working, the average number of children that women are getting is reducing. But either way, those who have already been born have to be planned for. So when we look at the GDP of Kenya, it says that the economy is growing, but we have remained at a very basic level of what we are producing and consuming. And the fact that the economy, according to the GDP, has been growing, yet unemployment has persisted for years, raises many, many questions about our economy. Then the third thing is, in the 80s and 90s, there was this issue of the school leaver problem, which I believe also exists today. And this is when once people complete high school or primary school in some cases, they move from the rural areas to the urban areas to look for formal jobs. And it's not limited to just the people who've left school. It's people of all ages migrating from the rural areas to the urban areas to look for work. So the assumption is that if they move from the rural areas to the bigger towns, they're more likely to get work and an income there. So the cities and major towns get so many people from the rural areas coming to look for work in the towns. And what drives this logic is poverty. So a good example is domestic workers or households coming from the village. I'm sure you've come across some of them who are even below 18 years. So areas like Nairobi become saturated with people looking for the same kind of work But unfortunately, the urban areas can't support everyone. So some people get lucky, they get jobs, and some not so lucky. And that takes me to the next issue. Now, number 4 is the issue of rural-urban development. Now, in the past, a lot of attention was given to developing specific areas, which became the urban areas and popular towns of today. And it was mostly for political reasons. Now, the consequence of this is that some areas of the country remain completely underdeveloped. And that's why some parts of this country don't look anywhere close to a third world country, while some rural areas completely fit the stereotype of Africa. Now, we're definitely not where we were in the 80s, but there's a lot more that could have been achieved in 40 years. So, whether we're talking about electricity connections, achieving peace and security, telecommunication networks, the transport systems, health facilities, education, housing, etc. So remember that the point of all this is to encourage people to invest and start their businesses in those areas so that they can provide employment to people living in those areas so that they can decongest the city. And the reason is so that people can stop moving to the popular towns, because like I said, these towns can't offer everyone a decent living. Plus, there are other costs to this relocation. Plus, now congestion in the urban areas becomes a problem. So I've seen one thing with this housing thing program, affordable housing program that they want to do, is to have housing, affordable housing in all the constituencies. So I guess this is one of the ways that they want to address this rural-urban development issue. Number 5 now is factors of production. Now, to produce anything, whether a product or a service, you need a combination of these things: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So a combination or a mix of all or some of them. So the 4 of those things are called factors of production. For example, to produce this content, you need labor, which is my time and my brains; capital, which is my camera, laptop, internet; and entrepreneurship, to take the risk to keep creating the content even if I have one viewer. Now, in the same light, there are many young creatives who are breaking the glass ceiling and making a living for themselves by creating entertaining content from their smartphones. And at that point, that phone is capital. Now, my point is there's nothing produced out of nothing, but that example is much simpler because the output is intellectual. You're not producing something physical. But what does this have to do with unemployment? Remember, the labor is there in excess. That's why we have high unemployment. But let's look at land as a factor of production, for example. Land is a very contentious issue in this country since colonization. Go and watch the Real Mheshimiwa series. So for a majority of young people today, land is almost inaccessible as a factor of production. And this is whether it's through renting and leasing, or even owning. It's basically become unattainable because of how expensive it is. Because a majority don't even have a stable or a decent job. And because of that, getting capital from a bank to grow your business can be very difficult. Why? In this country, as much as banks nowadays are trying to give loans without security, land as collateral is still a thing, and it increases your chances of getting the loan. Your paycheck, that you have a regular income coming in every other month, that is also a guarantee to the bank that you can be able to pay back the loan if you wanted to get capital to start your business. So if you have no source of income, how can you guarantee the bank that you'll actually be able to pay back the loan? That's the logic that banks use. You end up becoming very risky. And even if they give you the capital, the interest rates are still very high. Then let's go to entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is that thing that you don't want people to take up just as an alternative to not having a job. And that's the case of many people who are self-employed today. The path of an entrepreneur is not an easy one, neither is it a straightforward journey when you want to see a business grow. So it needs some serious commitment, and putting money in a business where the entrepreneur is not really committed becomes even riskier. And that's one of the dilemmas facing investors or banks when making the decision to give money to businesses. So they ask themselves, is the founder committed to the journey in the long term, or did they start the business because they have no other option? So just in case an opportunity presents itself, are they going to abandon the business and then we end up losing our investment? Then they also ask themselves, does the business have a chance to succeed in the country it operates in? And many other questions. So always remember, no businesses, no employment. Then another reason for unemployment in Kenya is that there is a mismatch between what the employers want and the skills that the employees have. So this is basically saying that we as the workers have the skills that employers don't need, or we don't have the skills that employers need. So there are three categories of people who are unemployed. People without skills, maybe because they didn't go to school. People who have skills to some extent, and these guys either dropped out of school at some point, so they got some skills, or they found a way to empower and educate themselves outside of the formal school system, but they don't really have very specialized skills. For example, nowadays with bundles, you can learn almost anything. Like you can learn computer literacy through Google, for example. But you can't learn how to be a pilot through Google because there's the actual flying experience that you need. Then we have the third category of unemployed people, and these are the guys who have the very technical skills. Maybe they even have a certificate, diploma, degree, master's, even PhD. And these are your architects, doctors, engineers, lawyers, microbiologists, chemical engineers, etc. Yani very specialized, those big titles. Now in Kenya, unemployment is no respecter of skills. Whether you have skills or semi-skilled, highly skilled, you're all on the same boat. So there's some countries where even if you reach high school level, there are jobs for you. So if you decide to advance your education, there are also jobs for you as well. So remember, I said there's a mismatch between the skills that the employers want and the skills that the people have. Now, one explanation for this mismatch is that most people want a job in the formal sector. But unfortunately, in Kenya, it's the informal sector that employs most people. 80% of workers are employed in the informal sector. So let me give an example. Let's say you're a doctor. So imagine, let me explain two scenarios. So a doctor or the medical field is highly specialized. So if you're not hired in the medical field or in an NGO in the medical field, like where are you going to take your skills? Because medicine is very technical. So it's either you get employed or you start your own practice, but even getting those authorizations in the medical field, you need authorizations from here to Timbuktu. And that's why unemployment among doctors is very high. Then the second scenario as an unemployed doctor is if you decide to settle for anything, you're competing with people who are less qualified than you for the same job. So it could be a receptionist role, a salesperson, security. There's nothing wrong with those jobs, but you just can't be hired because you're overqualified. Then another example is like the courses that were scrapped recently, like bachelors in astrophysics and astronomy and industrial mathematics. These are very specialized areas. So if there aren't enough companies locally that need these skills, you'll find yourself in trouble. And this isn't to say that the skills aren't important, by the way, but you'll have to be very creative to maneuver your employment. Which leads me to my next point. Another reason why people are unemployed is because they are very selective with the jobs they choose. They don't settle for anything, and I don't blame them either. And let me focus mainly on the people with specialized skills to explain this. Imagine you've been in school for 6 years to get the skills of an architect or engineer or teacher or any other technical field. But because there aren't enough jobs in your sector, you have two options. One, refuse to settle for anything and keep searching until you get what you really want, whether in the country or out of the country. But either way, you'll remain unemployed for a time. Option two, you're forced to settle for anything that comes your way, even though you might not have an interest in it. And because of that, we have very qualified people all running to apply for perpetual internships. You do one internship after another without getting permanently employed or compensated. And since employers know the state of unemployment in this country, they know you're desperate. So what do? They pay you with exposure. And also that is just modern day exploitation. So a country where people lack options is both a symptom and a consequence of a dysfunctional economy. And it's also a recipe for disaster, because you'll likely have very unmotivated employees literally doing their minimum at work. They could also become very unproductive. They come to work, they use your internet to look for another job, or they run down your business. So for anyone who chooses to settle, and for those who decide to keep searching, I don't blame any of you. Adulting is making tough choices. So guys who've experienced this, please leave a comment down below. Then number 8 on why we have high unemployment is technology. Now, when you're in a country with high unemployment, the last thing you want is very high investments in industries where machines do most of the work that could have been done by people. So in the report of 1983, it says that most of the industries in Kenya which use capital-intensive production processes are foreign-owned, and therefore a significant portion of their profits are repatriated to foreign countries rather than being plowed back into the economy. So what this is saying is that we had foreign investors investing in Kenya, but instead of investing in industries that would need more people, they put a lot of money into industries where a lot of the things could be automated and they didn't really need people. So whether this is a process being automated or a product being produced by automated machines and equipment and very little input of people. So that way they don't really need to hire many people. Then even after they make their profit, they don't reinvest it in Kenya. They take the profits back to their country. So when technology replaces people, it will contribute to unemployment. That is straightforward. So an example of this was that in May of 2023, some youth in Kericho vandalized and destroyed tip lacking machines because the machines were going to replace their jobs. And 9, one that can never ever miss out when you're talking about a country's economic problems, and this is when the government doesn't use their resources properly, if there's massive theft or wastage. So for example, when the road networks were being expanded in the last 10 years, it came at a great cost to the country. The country got into financial obligations which it shouldn't have, and the consequences have put a strain on the economy to date. Then another example is the issue of Kenya Power paying independent power producers for just existing, even when Kenya Power doesn't take power from them, and even wastage and theft within Kenya Power. So all these issues have manifested as a reason for high taxation, high cost of living, and the high cost of doing business that we see today. Then there's a time when we had enterprises that were owned by the government, which we completely ran down because of mismanagement and theft. These are companies like Mumia Sugar, East African Portland Cement, Pan Paper Mills, and others. So all these companies provided employment to people at one time. Then we also have poor investment choices by the government. For example, when the government chose to invest in a gun factory in 2020, where that money went to buy very automated machines instead of putting that money in an area that would have needed and employed way more people. So unemployment is also a consequence of poor economic governance. So hardly ever will you find that there's high unemployment in a country if the government is relatively responsible, meaning that it's accountable, transparent, and promoting relative fairness in the economy. Now, finally, there's been a lot of attention, like I said, being given to growing manufacturing in Kenya, especially in the industries that need more people than they do need technology. But unfortunately, because of either low demand, cheap imports, and a high cost of production in Kenya, it's becoming very difficult to maintain operations in Kenya. Because at the end of the day, even if a company gets tax breaks for manufacturing in Kenya, remember, it still needs people to have the money to buy their products. And disposable income has become a problem in Kenya because of a high cost of living and inflation. So many manufacturing companies in Kenya have either downsized or shut their operations in Kenya. For example, there's Colgate, Palmolive, Reckitt Benckiser, Unilever, Eveready, and many others. And when they shut down, thousands of people lose their jobs. Even the company that prints money in Kenya downsized its operations here recently, and 300 people lost their jobs, were going to lose their jobs. I don't know if they've already done that. So I'll come back to how the government has attempted to address all these causes of unemployment. But now, in my next video, I'll discuss the social cost of unemployment to the society. So make sure you click on the notification bell so that you can get a notification when I upload a video. So if you enjoyed this video, if you can relate, make sure you leave a comment. Also remember to share this video with anyone who is struggling to find a job. Just engage in this unemployment conversation. So yeah, as always, please do not forget to like, do not forget to subscribe. Many people are watching without subscribing. But either way, thank you for taking your time to being here. Thank you for getting to the end of this video. Thank you for watching. As always, I will see you in the next one. Cheers.